Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap presented by Full Press Coverage. Today was deadline day in the NBA as the trade deadline was at 3 o'clock Eastern time. It came and went without any mega deals happening. No massive names were traded. There was a lot of talk about maybe like a Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan getting potentially moved. Maybe there was some whispers about the Warriors potentially breaking things up, the Hawks sending out DeJounte Murray. None of that happened. The biggest name traded actually was Bojan Bogdanovic from the Detroit Pistons as he goes to the New York Knicks. And every other deal was sort of on the margin, Sap. Either getting a role player. In the case of Philadelphia, they sent out a couple of role players. They brought in Buddy Hield, who's a good veteran shooter. The Raptors got Kelly Olynyk, so some guys that will be in their regular rotation. But no blockbusters by any means. The teams that were the top contenders, the Celtics added a couple of bench depth players, Xavier Tillman from the Grizzlies, and I'm forgetting who they got from the Philadelphia 76ers off the top of my head.
Last
Yeah,
name is Springer.
Springer. So no one that's gonna make
Not Jerry Springer.
yeah.
No, I don't think they got Jerry Springer.
Right. No one that's going to make that kind of Jerry Springer impact on society going to the Celtics. But yeah, and the Lakers stood pat, Sap. I know we're going to talk about that. But yeah, an interesting trade deadline in that I think, and a lot of NBA analysts seem to think this is going to be sort of a sign of things to come because of the new way the CBA was structured with the second tax apron for teams. And teams just are not willing to take on insane amounts of salary anymore unless they are legitimate 1A contenders. And so that makes it more tricky to trade these really good players in season, Sap.
Well, the issue I have with this is probably threefold. First of all, it's too early. It's February 8th. It's the Thursday of the Super Bowl week. We're going to have kickoff between the 49ers and Chiefs in 3 days. Unless LeBron James was traded today, you're not going to get a lot of traction in terms of notoriety with this
Right.
trade deadline, right? So it's February 8th. I would move it 2 weeks forward to February 22nd. I would have it after the All-Star break. This way, when the executives get together All-Star weekend, they can maybe lay the groundwork and then pull off the trades 3-4 days later. So I would move it from the 8th to the 22nd. You still at that point have 6-7 weeks left in the regular season, so it's not only a month away from the end of the regular season. Look, there's still 2 months left in the regular season. So teams that are on the cusp of being in the play-in maybe don't want to move so much because they look at it and say, hey, if we can get in the play-in and get hot at the right time, maybe we can make some inroads. Look, last year, the Lakers were a 7 seed. They ended up making to the conference finals. The Heat were the 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. They made it all the way to the NBA finals. So teams probably look at it and say, let's stand pat or maybe add just a few small pieces that we could hang in there over the final 2 months, get in the play-in tournament, and see what happens. So I think it's too early. Move it to the 22nd or 2 weeks from wherever it's going to be next year after the All-Star break so that you get more traction in terms of maybe at that point teams can look and say, well, we're kind of out of it. We'll move on from players. I think that's one of the biggest issues with this because I can make a case that Gordon Hayward could be the best player that was moved, but he hasn't played since December 26th. So he goes from Charlotte to Oklahoma City. I mean, if he's healthy, which is not likely with Gordon Hayward, maybe Oklahoma City's added someone who can help them. But it's just too early. And with the play-in tournament, what's there? Maybe a half a dozen teams that feel they're out of it right now. So you're not just going to get any of those moves.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Sap. I think that it's far too early. I saw Bill Simmons tweeted out the same thing today. Like in terms of the NBA, you would want to try to generate the most headlines possible with your trade deadline, as all leagues do. And when you're putting it the week of the Super Bowl, you're just not going to win that headline battle. Everything is everybody's attention is on the game on Sunday, what the teams are looking like in practice, what they're all the things that are going on in Vegas right now with the press, and interviews of the teams and the coaches. So it's bad timing from just a pure marketing perspective. 100% agree with you there, Sap. And I think the idea you just said of having it at the All-Star game is really great because, like you said, it gives the executives chance to all be in the same place in person, sort of like the winter meetings in the MLB. And that's not during the season, obviously, but that's where a lot of deals are made. And so if the NBA is wanting to make this more exciting, you want to give teams more of a chance to hammer out these trades. And it's frankly, it's just easier to do in person than it is over the phone. So I agree, Sep, that I think that's a good way to do it, to look at it. I still think that the NBA is now going to have this hurdle of these new rules with the salary cap that is going to make it more difficult for teams to want to absorb salary or be able to absorb salary. Hence why you're seeing, the Celtics and the Bucks and who else has a massive salary? The Nuggets, the Clippers. They don't really have the ability to make any sort of big move, Sap, because they're over that second apron. The Suns made a minor move to get Royce O'Neal. Some people think he's worth a little bit more than I think he is. Apparently, the Nets turned down 2 first-round picks for him last year. Oh no, that was Finney Smith. Sorry, mistaking my Nets swingmen, Sap. But yeah, nothing major for any of these teams because they can't afford to do it because of these new cap rules, Sap. So like I said, just sort of around the margins. But the team, I think that a lot of people were expecting to make a move because this is sort of a hallmark of LeBron James teams making a big trade and a roster shift at the trade deadline if they're not playing particularly well. And the Lakers are about in the same spot as they were a year ago at this time. 27-25, 8.5 games out of first place, sitting at the 9 seed in the West right now. Are you surprised the Lakers didn't do anything, Sap?
I think they're waiting for the offseason. Look, they can catch fire, get hot, maybe pull off an upset or two. Can they get all the way to the finals? Probably not likely, since I think there's two teams that look to be, I wouldn't say head and shoulders above the rest of the Western Conference, but that I would think are better than the Lakers for sure. So we know Donovan Mitchell's probably going to be a free agent in the offseason. Maybe he goes to the Lakers and you have a big three of LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Donovan Mitchell next year. But again, LeBron's 39 years old. He and Anthony Davis have both been relatively healthy this year and both playing at a very high level, and you're still 27 and 25. You need those two guys to step up even more, especially on the defensive end, and you need those role players to step up for the Lakers so that they can get into contention. So, yeah, surprised that they weren't able to pull it off. But again, it's just so early, and the market just isn't there. It's, again, is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? It's kind of like real estate. It's difficult to buy a home now because the inventory is just not there and the interest rates are too high. Well, in basketball, when you only have a half a dozen teams who are starting to look ahead to next year, there's just not a lot of talent that's available for the other 20, 24 teams that still think they have a shot because of the play-in tournament. So that's why I would definitely move this thing up a couple of weeks to the 22nd of February. Look, the NHL runs concurrently with the NBA. Their trade deadline is always the first week of March, so that that there's 1 month left in the regular season. At that point, teams will fall out of contention and will move some of their talent to get draft picks or younger players or whatever it may be. So that's kind of the issue with the NBA. I think that they have to truly examine that. And again, how much fun would the All-Star weekend be with all the executives there and all the rumors floating around of potential trades that could take place 2-3 days after the All-Star game?
Yeah, and you're right, Sap. There's only 6 teams by my count that are out of it and have no chance of making the play-in tournament. Charlotte, Washington, and Detroit in the Eastern Conference, and Memphis, Portland, and San Antonio in the Western Conference. For various reasons, those teams are not even close to being in contention. In fact, those last 2 teams in the Eastern Conference, Washington and Detroit, have yet to even reach double-digit wins. And we're in second week of January. So, I certainly don't think anybody looked at this trade deadline and said, yeah, this was a really exciting trade deadline. But it does show, I think it is the potential to make it better, as we were talking about, and also the trickle-down effect that a new CBA can have on a trade deadline. A team that was really interesting to me, Sap, in terms of what they did today was the Philadelphia 76ers, who I think it was hard to get a read on which direction they're going in. Obviously, we know at this point Joel Embiid's out at least a month with his knee surgery. I would think longer than that. Could potentially miss the rest of the season. May be able to come back. It's all kind of up in the air at this point. They acquired, a really good player in Buddy Hield, Sap, from the Pacers. But then they also sent out to their two biggest rivals players that play in their rotation. Patrick Beverly went to the Bucks, and Jordan Springer, now I'm remembering his name is, who I guess a lot of Philadelphia fans liked, he goes to the Celtics. So sort of a curious deadline for them, as they didn't seem to really pick a direction fully.
Do you think at some point that Patrick Beverly just wears on his teammates and his
Yes.
coaches, right? So
Yes.
like you
I
have him
think
in
when
the
you do an
building.
in-season podcast and you're currently playing, it's probably not going to go over well. And I think the same thing about Draymond Green.
Sure. And how do we explain Grant Williams signing as a free agent last summer and getting moved by Dallas right away? These are irritating players, right? To their own teammates. Their role is generally to be irritating to the opposition. Well, in the course of doing that, they're oftentimes irritating to their own teammates. So Patrick Beverly, who I think eventually is going to play for every team in the league, either him or Dennis Schroeder are going to end up playing on every team in the league. And Schroeder's another guy who I think irritates his teammates. So you move on from him. He goes to Milwaukee. They need some defense on the perimeter, and maybe Beverly offers that. But what the hell has Patrick Beverly ever really accomplished, other than I think he's going to be fantastic on TV when he retires? Like, he's never played in a finals. Like, remember he won a play-in game with Minnesota a couple of years ago, and he was acting like he just won the championship. I mean, he's a personality more than he is a player, and he can contribute as a defensive player, although I think his game has slipped with age, like it oftentimes does. But yeah, that was a curious move for Philadelphia. And just looking closer at Philadelphia, now the 76ers probably going to fall to what, the 5-6 seed? Maybe they're going to have to go through the play-in if Embiid's out.
They're at 5 right now, Sap, 2.5 games below New York, who's at 4, and 2 games up on Indiana, who's at 6.
Right. So they could fall to 7 or 8, have to go through the play-in. Here's the thing that could happen. If Embiid misses, say, a month and a half, and he comes back the very end of March, it could benefit Philadelphia, because now you have a guy who generally, I wouldn't say collapses in the postseason, but doesn't play as well in the postseason as he does in the regular season.
But do you think he's going to stay in shape, Sap, while he's rehabbing his injury?
That's the big question. That's the big question. I mean, he could balloon up to 325 pounds for all we know over the next 6 weeks. If he stays in shape and is able to come back and play the last 10 days, 2 weeks of the regular season, gets his win back, and all of a sudden you've got Joel Embiid, who had 6 weeks off and is rested. Right. He may have an extra gear in the postseason that he's never had. I mean, I saw this with Michael Jordan. And again, it's difficult to compare anybody to Michael Jordan, but in 1986, Jordan's second year, he ended up with a fractured foot early in the season. The Bulls wanted him to sit out the rest of the season. He came back in March, was on a minutes restriction, and then ramped it up. So by the time he got to the playoff, he was 2 speeds ahead of everyone else. He was generally a speed of everyone else anyway. But then when he got to the playoffs and everybody else was dragging in April, he was just ready to roll. And that's where we saw 49 points in game 1 against the Celtics, 63 in game 2, the all-time record postseason scoring. So sometimes that can benefit the player. But you're right, Embiid's not Michael Jordan. Like, Michael Jordan, I'm sure, was impossible to deal with at that point, waiting to get back, and came back and played at an incredibly high level. Is Embiid going to sit around and put 25 pounds on, which is very easy to do for a guy that size? Yeah. That's the thing you have to look at with Philadelphia. So they can't really give up hope, because there is that possibility that he could come back and could have a lot left in the tank for the postseason. Probably not likely, but it's still there. You just can't give up hope, at this point in the season.
It's too early, obviously, and he was playing as the presumptive MVP after winning it last year. I mean, just playing great basketball. Whenever you have the best player in the court, you always have a puncher's chance. Though he was
the best player in the league this year until he got injured, in my opinion, even more so than Jokic. Yeah,
sure. And though he's, the big knock on him is he's struggled in the playoffs, has yet to reach a conference finals. And so, Philadelphia, I'm not sure they fully picked the direction today. They do have cap space in this offseason, so maybe they do similar to what the Lakers are thinking, in that they preserve their cap space and they revisit in the offseason. It perhaps is a better idea for the Sixers, who Joel Embiid is still in the prime of his career, versus LeBron, who will be 40 next season. That's the problem I had going back to them, Sap, with them standing pat, is that, okay, it's great. Maybe if you get Donovan Mitchell in the offseason, like, that's awesome, but that's a big if, and you're punting on another season of LeBron when he's, getting older He's still playing at an incredibly high level. We know that he wants to play with his son. Perhaps his son gets drafted, and maybe LeBron doesn't want to be on the Lakers anymore at that point. So it's a dangerous game, I think, that the Lakers are playing. I understand it more from the Sixers because there's a lot of uncertainty right now with the Embiid situation. But I think probably Sap, the team that's feeling the best about their trade deadline is the New York Knicks, who, as I mentioned, got Bogdanovich from the Pistons. He's a 20-point a game scorer. He won't be in the Knicks, but they've been playing great basketball, Sap, recently. 9-1 in their last 10 games. They are currently the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, in a statistical tie actually for the 3 seed with the Milwaukee Bucks, and just a game back of the 2 seed of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Sap. So the Knicks after already having added OG Anunoby a couple of months ago from the Raptors. He's actually hurt, but he's going to be out for just a couple of weeks. So how do you feel about the Knicks today, Sap? Are they a contender to go to the Eastern Conference Finals? Or are they a contender to go to the NBA Finals?
No, to either one. Again, and they've got some injury concerns, right, with Randall and Brunson's out for a short period of time. So they've got to get healthy. They were playing at such a high level. And again, the style of play of the Knicks wears out their team and wears out the opponents. And it's kind of suited for the regular season. Like they'll win 52 games or 50 games. But then when they get into a 7-game series, some of their shortcomings can be exposed by better teams. Now, they got to the second round of the playoffs last year, took Miami to 6 games in round 2 of the Eastern Conference playoffs. They upset Cleveland in round 1, which I still think was more about Cleveland just coming up way short in that series. They can win a series, sure. I mean, if they're the 4 seed, can they beat Philadelphia or Indiana, whoever's the 5 seed? Absolutely. And then at that point, they'd probably be locked up against the Celtics. And I think they would give the Celtics a whole lot of trouble, but the Celtics are better and should be able to win that series in, say, 6 or 7 games. I think they're the team that really causes problems, but just doesn't have enough extreme talent to beat better teams than they are. And I still think the Celtics, Milwaukee, and Cleveland are better teams than the Knicks at this point, even though they did add probably the best player at the trade deadline in terms of a guy who is going to go out and score some points for them, which, they all need, especially the Knicks, who play kind of that more of a grinded defensive style of play. I still wouldn't think of them as contenders for the NBA Finals or even the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, there was a wild rumor last week that the Lakers were going to trade LeBron, which that was never going to happen. The one rumor was the Knicks, which I think would be pretty cool. I also think another destination, Cleveland, would have been even cooler, to go Cleveland, Miami, Cleveland, Lakers, back to Cleveland, and maybe win a title there would have been, storybook. But the Lakers weren't trading LeBron, and he wasn't going anywhere. But I still would leave the Knicks below those other 3 teams because I just think that their style of play is great in the regular season. When you get to the postseason and you're facing the same team game after game after game, talent ultimately wins out.
Could you see them finishing as high as the 2 seed, Sap?
They could, because they show up every night, right? Like they're the one team that shows up every night. And look, you can make a case that Brunson is the best free agent signing in the history of the league in terms of value, right? Because when he signed with the Knicks, and I think it was a 4-year, $85 million deal, I was like, if the Knicks lost their minds, like I didn't think he was worth that. He's worth way more than that. The guy is, to me, a top 10 MVP candidate. I don't know about top 5, but he's a top
4
10
years,
MVP
104.
4 years, 104, even more so. So you're talking $26 million a year. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, right? That seemed like
And the Mavs, remember, the Mavs punted on it. They didn't match. They could have matched if they had chosen to.
Which can lead us into another discussion about Luka, right? As much as I love Luka, and you do too, it seems like when people leave Luka, they play better. Right? We see Porzingis, what he's done with the Celtics. We see what Brunson's done with the Knicks. It seems like people leave Luka and they play better. And Kyrie hasn't played as well in Dallas as he did in Brooklyn or Boston or wherever else he's played. Yeah, I think he's a top 10 MVP candidate. I mean, if the Knicks win 52 games, they have to have someone in the MVP discussion, and he's the guy. I mean, he's winning games player for them without question, and like night in and night out, he's phenomenal. Like, and look, Randall was also a good free agent signing. Like both of those signings, I was like, wow, they're kind of overpaying for guys I thought were good, not great players. Well, they've both played at a very high level with the Knicks. both All-Stars. Randall's going to miss the game because of the injury, but
So Sap, could they beat the Bucks in a 7-game series?
yeah, because I'm not sold on the Bucks. I'm
Could they
not.
beat
And
the
I know we're
Cavs
gonna.
in a 7-game series?
No, I think the Cavs are better. And
And
again,
if
they
so, in
did
a
beat them
rematch of
last year.
last year, you would have the
I would
Cavs
take the
this year.
Cavs. Yeah, I think the Cavs. Look, I think Mitchell will be better this year.
Also
I think
9-1 in their past 10 games, for what it's
they've
worth.
been the
So,
hottest team in the league since Christmas. I mean, they're the 2 seed right now, and I think they're the team that could give the Celtics the most trouble in the Eastern Conference because they have 2 great defensive bigs in Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Look, we could talk about Damian Lillard and what he's done or not done with Milwaukee. Right now, who would you take as a player, Damian Lillard or Donovan Mitchell? I think it's an easy answer. It's
yeah,
Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell, for sure.
Without question, he's younger. He's just better right now.
For what it's worth, I might take Jalen Brunson over both of them at this point, too.
You may have a point there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Lillard to me, and look, I like Damian Lillard. I think he's been overrated over the years. I can't believe he made the NBA's top 75. I don't think he deserved to be on that team. I think he's the classic big fish in little pond, like in Portland, where he was the guy, put up big numbers. They got to conference finals once, got swept by Golden State. Marvelous player. I'm not taking anything away from him. Future Hall of Famer. And again, a lot of players make the Hall of Fame in the NBA. But we've seen that he's a horrible defensive player. And again, now he's trying to share the spotlight with Giannis, and it still hasn't quite worked out with those 2 guys. It looks kind of ugly. They changed coaches. It's even worse with Doc Rivers. I think Cleveland's the team that could give the Celtics the most trouble because, look, they beat them 3 out of 4 last year. And again, with those 2 really good defensive bigs, they caused some matchup problems. Cleveland's another team. Why didn't they go and get something to add to their team and maybe make them even a stronger title contender? But the Celtics are the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. I mean, if they don't get to the finals this year, they're going to get rid of Joe Mazzulla and, maybe bring in multiple psychiatrists to figure out what's wrong with that team because they're better than any other team in the Eastern Conference. The West, to me, is much deeper than the East this year. It's ready-made for the Celtics. They have to take care of business. But I think the team that could give them the most trouble is Cleveland. But the Knicks are a great story. The Knicks are the student that, is, studying all the time, turns in the assignment early, does everything they're supposed to, and they get like a B+ because they're just not as gifted as the A+ student who maybe sometimes screws around and forgets to pass in their assignment and waits to the last second to do it. But, the Knicks are, if every team in the league was like the Knicks, the league would be that much better because they bring it every single night.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the hallmark of a Tom Thibodeau team. It
Sure.
does eventually burn out, but he's got guys who have obviously bought into this, and it's working well for the Knicks. And the league's much more fun when they're not god awful. And unfortunately for Knicks fans, for the past 30 years, most of it they've spent being god awful. So this is, this is exciting for them, certainly, and they've been playing some fantastic basketball. Now, if you go look out in the Western Conference as it stands post-trade deadline, the team that is number 1 in the West, well, that's sort of up for debate, Sap, because we have a statistical tie for the top 3 teams. Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Denver, and the Clippers are only a half game back of those teams. But yeah, Denver, Minnesota, and Oklahoma City are all 35-16 right now, Sap. Oklahoma City added Gordon Hayward. You mentioned that earlier. What that does for them maybe brings them a little bit of a veteran presence that they lack because they are a very young team, though it's not like he's had a ton of success in the postseason in his career. Minnesota didn't do anything of note. Denver did not do anything of note, and the Clippers are capped out, so they couldn't do anything. And those one of those teams is going to finish in first, Sap. That's going to be the order in some order because they're 5 games ahead of Phoenix and New Orleans and Sacramento. I don't think they're going to catch them. So 1, 2, 3, 4 will be Denver, Clippers, Minnesota, Oklahoma City in some order. And those teams, like I said, are deadlocked right now.
It's incredible. They're all on pace to win 55 games. And then after that, you can see how deep the Western Conference is, right? You're talking about Phoenix and Sacramento, Dallas. Look, when Dallas has Kyrie and Luka playing well together, they're not going to be an easy out. The Lakers, as much as they've been up and down this year, they still have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and those guys have played really well this year, and they've been fairly healthy. New Orleans, when Zion's out there, they're a completely different team. Like the West is so much deeper. And I didn't even mention Golden State, who, may sneak in through the play in, but Steph Curry can win a game or two in the play in and get that team into the postseason. And now you see Jonathan Kuminga, who may be up for most improved player of the year, really starting to figure it all out on the court. So the West is so much deeper than the Eastern Conference. But you look at the top four teams, I think two teams are better than the rest in the Western Conference, and I think it's Denver and the Clippers. I love Minnesota. I love what they've done. I love Oklahoma City. I
Well, it's
love
much
what
more
they've done.
proven players on those two teams,
Exactly.
Seth.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Nikola Jokic, who is the best player in the league, along with Joel Embiid. Now, I'll just say Jokic is the best player in the league because he's just more durable than Embiid. He's already won a championship and he's won 2 MVPs. So let's just we crowned him that at the end of last year. Let's leave him there. I don't want to start changing, every 3 weeks on who the best player in the league is.
Likely going to win another MVP this year too.
At
now
this
that
point,
Jokic is out.
right? Yeah, because he plays. I mean, that's the other thing that he has going for him. The guy shows up and plays.
Yeah.
Where Embiid's always had injury concerns, and Giannis, I think his game's kind of leveled off, and Luka. Dallas isn't good enough really for him to be an MVP. And then you can get into SGA and Jason Tatum and a bunch of other guys. But Luka's the favorite to win the MVPs. Anthony Edwards as well. All fabulous players. But Nikola Jokic is the best player in the league. And the Clippers, to me, are the team that if you told me here's $100 bet on a team to win the championship, it would be the Clippers. And the reason being is Kawhi Leonard every 5 years does this. He did it in 2014. He led the Spurs to the championship. Now, he wasn't a fully formed player at that point, but he was the finals MVP. 5 years later, he leads Toronto to the championship. He's the finals MVP. And remember, after the 19th season, people were like, is he the best player in basketball?
Yeah.
And, when you look at his fully formed game, he's in that discussion. He just doesn't play enough. Well, here we are 5 years later, and he's back into the discussion. Is this guy the best all-around player in the game? It's like every 5 years he shows up. It's not quite the Olympics or the election. It's one more year than that. But
it's like
I think that
they're
going to. It is, yeah. Every 5 years, this guy shows up and is the best player in the world. I mean, Eli Manning did this, right? 2007, 2011. He won Super Bowls. Other than that, the guy didn't really accomplish a heck of a lot. Kawhi's been better than that. Also, you have Paul George firmly entrenched as the second best player on that team. And look, I know it's easy to bash him, but let's not forget a couple of years ago, he had a breakthrough in the postseason. He led the Clippers to the conference finals against Phoenix without Kawhi Leonard. Now you've got James Harden playing the role that he's best suited for at this point in his career. He's still a fabulous facilitator. I mean, he's right among the league leaders in assists, right? And he's still a guy who's capable of going 20-10 any given night. Pressure's off him. In Philadelphia, he was the second guy. In Houston, he was the top guy. Now he's the third guy. So he can kind of play off of Leonard and Paul George. And then you got Russell Westbrook accepting that role of
it's
being
working.
the sixth man off the bench, which I talked about that with the Lakers. Let him be the leader of your second unit. And they have a fabulous coach in Ty Lue. I think the Clippers are going to be very difficult to beat because, look, Kawhi is a guy who's proven he can win. If I was, again, a betting man, I would say you're going to see Denver and the Clippers in the conference finals, although it could not happen because of seeding, right? If it turns out they may have to meet in the second round, which I think would be a shame. But the West is so much deeper than the East, and you still got to look out for the Lakers and Phoenix and Dallas because of that high-end talent. In Oklahoma City and Minnesota feel a little bit like Sacramento last year. Great regular season, fun team to watch. Do they have the experience to beat the Lakers, Dallas, or Phoenix if those teams have their acts together? And they're going to need to do that to beat Oklahoma City or Minnesota. But with that experience that they have and that high-end talent, don't be surprised if the Lakers or Dallas or Phoenix upset Oklahoma City and Minnesota if they meet in the first round of the playoffs. But I would go with the Clippers and Denver as the two teams in the Western Conference. And like I said, I think we're going to see a Boston-LA final. It's just going to be the Clippers, not the Celtics. Look, Jet, the Detroit Lions made it to the NFC Championship.
Yes, they
game.
did.
So anything's possible at this point, right? The Clippers could win a championship.
And really should have made it to the Super Bowl, but blew the game.
Right. Dan Campbell decided that, he didn't trust his kicker. So maybe the Winnipeg Jets win the Stanley Cup. I don't know. Maybe this is the odd year. But the Texas Rangers just won the World Series a few months ago. This could be the year the teams never won finally win.
Yeah, well, Sap, I think that the key there is the experience thing is what separates the contenders in the playoffs. And if you look in the West, like you just said, Kawhi has won it a couple times already. So you have that kind of winning pedigree on that team, despite the fact that you have kind of a perennial loser in James Harden and Paul George, and the Clippers stink of a franchise. But you do have a guy who's won it twice and been the best player in the court when he has won it. Denver, obviously, as we mentioned, Nikola Jokic, they're the defending champions, so you can't count them out. And in the Eastern Conference, Giannis has won it already. We know he knows what it takes to get there, and the Celtics have gotten to the finals. So they know what it takes to. They've won a lot of series with this team, with this core sap of Brown and Tatum. A lot of series. They just haven't been able to convert into winning the whole thing. And so, I still think they're the team to beat. But that's that experience level of getting to the finals, I think, puts them pretty squarely ahead of a team like Cleveland or New York or Philadelphia or Indiana. And I can't do it. I'm not going to discount Miami, even though they have not been playing good basketball. And Terry Rozier, that trade that I thought was a home run for them, that hasn't worked out great so far. He's averaging 11 points per game as a member of the Heat after averaging 23 as a member of the Hornets. But they turn into a completely different team when it gets into the postseason. And so I can't discount them either, Sap.
No, you can't. But this thing is set up for the Celtics to represent the Eastern Conference in the finals.
It'd be a massive failure
It would be.
if they don't get there, Sap.
And look, if they could walk to the finals, I don't think they're going to go, faux like Moses Malone said 40 years ago, because they never quite take care of business the way they're supposed to. Heck, they needed 6 games to beat Atlanta in the first round of the playoffs last year when they should have swept that team, or at worst won that series in 5. Then they needed to go 7 against Philadelphia when Philadelphia was trying to hand them the series. So they always make it much more difficult than they should. And we're 3 days away from the Super Bowl. And if you're a Celtics fan, root for the San Francisco 49ers. I've been saying this the last couple of years. The Celtics are the 49ers of the NBA, right? Best roster.
Just constantly knocking at the door. Yeah.
Knocking at the door. Look, their resumes are identical. When you think about it, like the 49ers have gone to 4 of the last 5 conference championship games in the NFC. The Celtics are constantly in the Eastern Conference finals, right? They each have gone to a finals. San Francisco losing the Super Bowl 4 years ago to the Chiefs, the Celtics losing the NBA finals 2 years ago to the Golden State Warriors. Heck, the teams that beat them are led by similar type players, right? I mean, how many times would we call Patrick Mahomes the Steph Curry of the NFL?
Right.
In both situations, the Celtics were up 2-1 and had, a 5-point lead with 3.5 minutes left in game 4. And the 49ers were up 10 points in the fourth quarter against Kansas City. So they're so similar. Like, you're just waiting for them to win a championship. They have the great brand, right? The 49ers, the team of the 80s, the Celtics, with the 17 championships. So if you're a Celtics fan, root for the 49ers on Sunday, because if they win, I think it'll lead to the Celtics winning the championship. Not that it means anything that happens,
I'm already rooting for them, Sap, but now you've given me even more reason to root for them.
You're rooting for them because you want to protect Tom Brady and the Patriots' legacy.
Very much.
So,
very much
yeah.
so, yeah.
And I'm just rooting for them because Jed York's uncle is Italian, and he used to own the team, so Jed York's pride Italian.
Perfect.
So I got to root for the Italian owner in the NFL.
I thought maybe you were rooting for the 49ers so that, Mahomes is closer to Patrick Mahomes, or has he already surpassed him? I mean, sorry, closer to Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, no, he surpassed him. I have him right now as the 5th best quarterback of the Super Bowl era. If he wins on Sunday, I move him to number 3 behind Brady and Montana. I put him ahead of Elway and Manning if that's the case, because he'll have one more Super Bowl than those guys, and he's done it all in 6 years. But I think San Francisco is just better, and they'll find a way to win.
It's I'm gonna pick the Chiefs. I'm rooting again for the 49ers, but a couple things have concerned me about the 49ers. Sap. One, they seem to not have a grasp on what field they're playing on. Like, they're practicing on different, which was weird. And 2, they were talking about a lack of effort in the NFC Championship game. Like, how can that be? How can you talk about a lack of effort in an NFC Championship game? So I don't know. There's some weird behind the scenes things going on with them too. But it would be very
kind of sounds like the Celtics a little bit, right?
Does.
Like the Celtics are like, getting down 3-0 against the Miami Heat with the 8th seed.
Like,
I mean,
what are you
they're so
doing?
similar, very similar.
Except for the 49ers
vibes.
have a much better coach than the Celtics have.
Yes, if Kyle Shanahan was coaching the Celtics, I'd feel much more comfortable with that being the case. Actually, Tom Thibodeau.
Joe Mazzulla was doing like Taekwondo at the
Yes.
Celtics practice facility the other day in the middle of practice, like with
Well,
his sensei.
it's probably better off him doing that than trying to coach the team. Just get
It's
out of the
very
way,
strange.
Joe. I mean, Casey
He's a
Jones did that.
weird guy,
Well,
Sap.
I
Very
like
weird
listening
guy.
to his weekly hit on the Sports Hub with Zolak and Bertrand because he talks. He's an interesting guy. I'd like to meet him and talk to him
He's
because
just strange
he's very
person.
strange. But he mandated that everybody on that show watch Raging Bull, which is one of my 3 favorite movies of all time. And that was pretty cool that someone his age, and he's about your age as well.
And The Town. That's
movie
he
guy.
says he watches that movie once a week.
Yeah, which
That's a
is
good movie,
strange.
but that's insane.
Yeah. Well, I think he does it. I guess he's breaking down film and he has it on in the background and he just likes certain scenes in the movie, I guess. But he was pumping the tires of Raging Bull, which to me is, along with The Godfather and Godfather Part 2, the 3 greatest movies ever made. So I was interested in that. I think he's an interesting guy. He's just very sensitive and he's
Very
just
sensitive,
so
yeah.
baked into his way of winning. Like the other night, Tatum goes 2 for 13 from 3. Why is Jason Tatum taking all these threes? He's not a really good 3-point shooter. He's great in the mid range and he's phenomenal going to the basket. Like if he just concentrated on that stuff, he'd be even better. I mean, his idol didn't take 13 threes in games. Kobe Bryant, again, different sport, 15 years ago. But root for the 49ers. That means the Celtics will win the championship if that's the case.
I saw Missoula when the Grizzlies came to Boston. They gave a nice tribute for Marcus Smart as was deserved. And
you
they
were probably there cheering him. Yep.
I should have been there, but he was injured, so I decided to not get tickets for that.
Okay.
For that game. But Missoula was doing his radio hit with Sean Grandy, and he said he was reconnecting with Smart, and he was at Smart's wedding, and they're close, and he was talking. He said, Marcus and I are really friendly because friendly too because we talked about how similar we were as collegiate players, and he wasn't joking. And I was thinking, Marcus Smart was a collegiate All-American, top 5 pick in the NBA draft, or top 6 pick in the NBA
wasn't
draft.
he like
Joe Mazzulla averaged 4 points a game in West Virginia.
Yeah.
How are you similar at all?
He's a character. He really is. Yeah. I mean, Marcus Smart was. The thing about Marcus Smart, we talk about this underdog. Like you said, he was a 6th pick in the draft. He was an All-American. I think he was up for College Player of the Year. He was a superstar at Oklahoma State. Yeah, it's not like he, was drafted in the 2nd round, and he wasn't Patrick Beverly, an undrafted free agent who has played in multiple countries. But yeah, Missoula is a character, but he could be the reason they don't win the championship. And like I said last year, you've given the keys to the Lamborghini to a 16-year-old who just got his learner's permit, and that can be dangerous.
So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I hope everybody enjoys the Super Bowl on Sunday. Sap is picking the Niners to win. I'm picking the Chiefs, but rooting for the Niners to win. I do think, Sap, it would be a very eerie Tom Brady path for Mahomes to lose to a kind of subpar quarterback.
Sure.
Sort of like you just mentioned with Eli Manning. So Brock Purdy.
And Nick Foles. Yeah. I mean,
and Nick Foles. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I
forgot about that one. But yeah, that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Make sure you check out Full Press Coverage. They have tons of Super Bowl stuff going on right now, previews for the game and all sorts of insights. Check that out. Check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Strower. We'll be back next week with some new NBA content. And we'll talk to you later, everybody. See ya.